What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video we're going to be making a knife out of these copper scrubbers. These guys are 99.99% copper, and I've actually used these before in a different video, but I wasn't really happy with the end result, so I wanted to give it another try and try to make a bigger knife. So we're going to be cleaning them up with some acetone first, make sure there's no residuals on there or any kind of residues that might get in the way of it properly forging. And once we got them nice and dried off, we're going to go ahead and put them into a canister. I've already layered this one with some white spray paint on the inside to make sure the contents do not stick to the can, and hopefully we can have a nice clean release. The one thing that mainly differentiates this one from the last one is I have a much bigger canister, and I'm using right around 3 times the amount of sponges that I did on the first one. I believe the first one was 5 and I'm using 15 on this one. So I'm going to start off with a bulk material, hopefully a bigger billet than last time. Last time it cracked in half, and that is pretty standard for these kinds of billets because they have a lot of air and they're primarily made of powder and copper, which copper doesn't really bind the best. So it is going to be pretty crumbly at the beginning. Hopefully it doesn't break in two like the original one did. As you can see from all the tapping, how all of the copper powder just goes straight in because there's so many voids in there. So it's important to shake up the can and make sure that everything is filled as best as possible. Because this canister is a lot bigger than my usual ones, I have to weld a holding stick to the side. I don't have tongs that I can properly hold this with. So once I have it initially forged, I'll pop that right off. One thing I've noticed from doing a couple of these billets is that because there is so much air in between the powder and so much powder is being used, and there's so much air in between the copper scrubbers, the billet tends to collapse on itself and try to fold whenever we do any kind of pressing to it. So it ends up reducing a lot more and it becomes a bit of a pain to work with. So unlike the clean releases I usually get, this one I have to eventually cut out because it's just clamped in all kinds of different directions from different creases that we get whenever we end up pressing the can. Alright guys, I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about today's sponsor, Anson Belt & Buckle. As many of you might know, Anson Belt & Buckle has sponsored multiple videos on this channel, and I continue working with them because I really like the product. Now, I've been using their product ever since November, and this is my everyday belt. Now, one of the cool things about Anson Belt & Buckle is that the belts are micro adjustable, so you can adjust up to every 1/4 of an inch. Another really cool thing about Anson Belt & Buckle is that they come in one size fits all, so you can unlatch this little back piece right here and you can remove the belt from the buckle. What this lets you do is 2 things. One, you can adjust the size of your belt in case, let's say, you lose a lot of weight for some reason, or maybe you give the belt to somebody else after you get another one for yourself, and you can adjust the size of the belt to fit that person. Another thing is you can always switch out your belt and your buckle to get different matches. So if you have multiple buckles and multiple belts and you want to get some kind of combination for a special occasion, maybe something to match whatever you're wearing, that is definitely one of the things that you can do with these belts. That's one of the cool little features that I really like. Another thing, this belt has been my daily belt for the last 5 months. I use it every day for regular wear, and I use it for work. I work in construction, and I'm constantly hanging tools from this guy. And this guy has pretty much no wear and tear over the last 5 months. And if you don't want a black leather, they have brown, they have gator skin, they have all kinds of different things that you can choose from to be able to customize your belt the best way that you like. And because Anson Belt and Buckle is sponsoring this video, when you go into the description down below or in the pinned comment, or you scan this QR code that's going to appear right around here, and you can get 3 belts and 3 buckles for the price of 4. That's 6 pieces for the price of 4. That's an extra belt and an extra buckle absolutely free just for using this QR code or the link in the description down below. Special thanks to Anson Belt and Buckle for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to our build. With the billet removed, you can see it's still very crumbly, and that is because of the way the whole billet is set up. A lot of it is powder, and that powder tends to have very minor gaps in it even after we forge weld it, because there's no real solid matter. And on top of that, it's being held primarily by very thin strands of copper, which do not bind very well and do not like to hold up at higher heats, and that promotes a very crumbly billet. As you can see right here, even after we end up stretching it out, it's still very crumbly towards the end, and it looks very rough on the inside. For the construction of this billet, I'm going ahead and doing a little bit of an extra bit for my tang. That way I ensure I have enough material and I don't have to use any of that actual good steel that I spent so much time making. Also, I'm layering a very thin piece of sheet metal on top, and I'm hoping that keeps it from cracking any further while we stick everything together. Once I've ensured that everything is stuck very well and braced together, I'm going over to my drawing dies to get a little bit more width in my billet. Originally, I was going for a bit of a cleaver. Ultimately, I couldn't get the width that I wanted, so I ended up with a Nikiri instead. Even though this knife looks big, and it is big, it is slightly over 8 inches long, and it is about 2.5, 2 3/4 tall. I did lose a lot of material because of all the cracking on the edges, which we just can't keep. Since this knife is essentially a big rectangle, it was very easy to grind. Though I did make sure that there was no kinds of cracks or any iffy spots on my spine. I did end up leaving a little bit more material that was a little bit more damaged towards the edge. And that is because I can grind back that edge once I get my profile in, and I can see exactly where the good material starts, and then I can draw my edge back to that spot versus just cutting off material without really knowing if I'm getting rid of good material or bad material. And here I kind of decided that the knife was very long and the tang wasn't quite long enough. So I'm preheating my tang and a little spare piece of material, and I'm just gonna add an extra inch to my tang. This piece isn't really structural, it just kind of looked off, and I would rather have a little bit more of the actual knife holding onto the handle than what I had there. And I'm welding on the exact same material that I used for the tang, which is the same as the core material, which is 5160. And we go into our heat treat. One of the things I really love about heat treating copper is the way it looks when it comes out. That copper color just pops really beautifully. Alright, so we're out of the timber. The knife is looking good. We got plenty of that movement in there with the copper. And overall, it's coming out pretty nice. We're going to go on ahead and finish grind it. It's nice and straight. So we're going to put it into the surface grinder, clean it up, and then we'll go from there. Overall, it's a nice little hefty. I was going for a cleaver, ended up being a little bit shorter, so more like an Akiri. I don't know. It's big. It's nice. I like it. And we're on to our finished grind. This was a very standard grind. All I ended up was doing a straight bevel all the way through and bringing it back as best I could. I did have a couple trouble spots that were a bit iffy while I was grinding it, but I was fortunate enough to be able to grind it thin enough where I was able to make sure I had no copper crossover. And then we hand sand this beauty. This took a lot longer than the few second clip that you get here. Alright guys, so for handle I got this piece of Spalton maple. I'm going ahead and prep it, and I'll probably be adding some extra wood to this as well. There's something I have to admit. This is actually my third handle. I actually ended up messing up the first one by over grinding it on the very final grind when I was shaping it up, and the second one I ended up kind of trying something new and not squaring everything out right, which just straight ruined it. And just to save time, I didn't really include these in here because that would make the video twice as long. But this was definitely my third time as the charm, and I was pretty frustrated by this part seeing I had spent a pretty good while just on handles that ended up not working. Let me know in the comments down below if you run into issues like that where you just, I was in a hurry and I just overground just a tiny little bit, but unfortunately it's very easy to take away and it's very hard to put something back, especially when it's wood. Though I must admit I did get a lot of experience and a lot of practice in making this handle. And that's not to say that I didn't put a lot of work into this handle. I was actually very meticulous about it, and I did a lot more math than I usually do on my handles to make sure that I ground up to the line perfectly, and that line was as square as I could get it and as mathematically even as I could. Though there's always error, it's being handmade. Just a little bit of a oopsie here and oopsie there, and it's not anymore. And now that we have the handle done, we're going to move on to our etching. For some reason, I always get a little bit of copper haze. I think I'm going to try the gator piss that a lot of makers are using. I think I'm going to order some of that and see if that gives me a better etch overall. Let me know in the comments down below if you use gator piss, and let me know what you think about it. I hear it's some very good stuff. I just haven't really gotten to ordering it, but I will here in the near future, and hopefully it helps me get some very nice and the clean etches, especially on copper where I have that little bit of haze that just is kind of getting on my nerves at this point, especially on very heavily coppered knives like this one. Alright guys, we're on the part of the video where I'd like to ask you guys for a favor. Go on ahead and check if you are subscribed, because I get a lot of viewers but I don't get a lot of subscriptions. And according to my metrics, about 86% of you guys are not subscribed. So if you do me the favor of subscribing, it's a free way to help support my channel and to support my small business. I would really appreciate that. Another way to help support my small business is by buying knives. I have a website and I put my knives up for sale, and this one's up for sale right now. If you're interested in picking it up, it will be in the description down below. I also have a bunch of other cool knives on there that are up for sale if you want to pick one of those up. And finally, you can help support my channel by simply commenting and hitting that like button. I would really appreciate that. Let me know what you think about the knife in the comments down below, and we can chat. Overall, this knife came out very sharp and I'm very happy with it. It is right at 8 inches long and ended up being just at 2¼ inches tall. Overall, the pattern came out great. I'm very happy with the way it looks, and I'm happy I was able to make a nice big bulky knife out of this material. And I really just love the way the copper swirls in there with the powdered steel, and it gives that very distinct, very cool looking pattern. Overall, it's very fun to build. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing, and I really appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.